There's a war happening inside your heart right now. You might not recognize it as warfare because it doesn't announce itself with trumpets or battle cries. Instead, it whispers, it suggests. It offers what appears to be wisdom wrapped in caution, protection disguised as prudence. This is the battle between trust and fear, and if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that fear has been winning more often than you'd like. Fear feels safer than faith because fear promises control. It tells you that if you can anticipate every possible disaster, calculate every potential loss, and guard against every conceivable threat, then you'll be secure. Faith, on the other hand, asks you to step into the unknown, to release your grip on outcomes you cannot control, to trust in goodness you cannot guarantee. Fear speaks the language of self-preservation. Faith speaks the language of surrender, and surrender to our human hearts feels like stepping off a cliff blindfolded. But here's what fear doesn't tell you in its seductive whispers of safety. The cage it builds to protect you becomes the very prison that destroys you. The walls you erect to keep danger out also keep life from getting in. The trust you refuse to give to God, to others, to the process of growth itself, becomes the trust you place entirely in your own limited understanding, your own fragile strategies, your own exhaustible strength. This battle is not new. It has raged in human hearts since the garden, since the first whispered question, "Has God really said?" It continues today in boardrooms and bedrooms, in churches and coffee shops, in the quiet moments before dawn, when your mind rehearses every possible way today could go wrong. The battle for trust is the battle for your soul's freedom, and freedom always requires risk. Before we go deeper into this territory that might feel uncomfortable but necessary, I need you to do something that helps me continue bringing you content that changes lives. Give this video a like right now. That simple action tells me we're exploring truth that resonates with your heart. Then subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because what we're about to uncover together will fundamentally shift how you understand the relationship between security and surrender. Your subscription isn't just a number to me. It's a declaration that you're choosing truth over comfort, growth over safety. Do that now, and then let's continue this journey together. The nature of this battle begins with understanding what trust actually is and what it is not. Trust is not the absence of wisdom. Trust is not naivety dressed up in spiritual language. Trust is not the decision to ignore red flags or dismiss legitimate concerns. True trust is the conscious choice to believe in goodness despite incomplete information, to act on love despite the possibility of loss, to move forward despite the guarantee of uncertainty. Fear masquerades as wisdom by presenting worst-case scenarios as inevitable outcomes. It takes the possibility of pain and transforms it into the certainty of destruction. It whispers that hope is foolishness, that vulnerability is weakness, that trust is the luxury of people who haven't been hurt enough yet. Fear builds its case on evidence carefully selected from your past wounds, your unhealed disappointments, your catalogue of moments when trust felt like betrayal. But fear's logic is fundamentally flawed because it operates from the assumption that you can actually control outcomes through worry, that anxiety serves as armor, that suspicion functions as protection. Fear treats trust as a commodity to be rationed rather than a muscle to be strengthened. It suggests that the heart, once broken, should never risk breaking again, as if pain is the ultimate enemy rather than growth's inevitable companion. The flesh chooses the illusion of safety, the spirit chooses the reality of growth. The flesh hoards trust like a miser hoards coins, parceling it out only when guarantees are provided. The spirit spends trust like an investor who understands that the greatest risks often yield the greatest returns. The flesh demands proof before faith. The spirit offers faith as the pathway to proof. This battle intensifies because our culture has taught us that trust should be earned rather than given, that skepticism is sophistication, that emotional self-protection is emotional intelligence. We've been trained to believe that the person who trusts easily is naive, while the person who withholds trust is wise. We've confused discernment with suspicion, boundaries with walls, caution with fear. But consider this, every meaningful relationship in your life began with an act of irrational trust. You trusted that stranger's smile in a coffee shop. You trusted that first conversation would lead somewhere beautiful. You trusted that commitment made in love would weather the storms that commitment inevitably brings. Every friendship, every romance, every partnership that has brought joy to your life started with a leap of faith that had no guarantee of landing safely. The same principle applies to your relationship with God, with yourself, with the process of becoming who you were created to be. Trust is not the destination. Trust is the vehicle. Faith is not the goal. Faith is the means by which impossible goals become possible realities. But fear convinces you that the vehicle is too dangerous, the road too uncertain, the destination too far away to be worth the journey. Fear operates through sophisticated psychological tactics that make its voice seem like the voice of reason. It doesn't announce itself as fear. Instead, it presents itself as realism, as learned experience, as hard-earned wisdom. Fear is a master of disguise, appearing in forms that seem virtuous, rational, even spiritual. Fear disguises itself as planning when it obsessively rehearses catastrophic scenarios. It calls itself preparation when it actually operates as paralysis. Instead of creating strategies for success, fear-based planning creates elaborate contingencies for failure. It spends more energy imagining what could go wrong than creating pathways for what could go right. This is not wisdom. This is worry masquerading as responsibility. Fear masquerades as discernment when it automatically assumes negative intent in others' actions. True discernment sees clearly, weighing both positive and negative possibilities with equal consideration. Fear-based discernment, however, always tips the scales toward suspicion. It interprets neutral events as threatening, reads worst-case motivations into unclear situations, and treats caution as if it were revelation from God. Fear presents itself as faithfulness when it refuses to move beyond the familiar. It calls stagnation stability, names comfort zone contentment, and labels resistance to growth as loyalty to God's will. But faithfulness is not the absence of change. Faithfulness is remaining true to God's character, while embracing the growth He calls you toward. Fear-based faithfulness worships the past while sabotaging the future. Fear operates as false humility when it insists you're not qualified, not ready, not worthy of the good things God wants to bring into your life. It takes the virtue of humility and weaponizes it against your destiny. True humility says, I am not sufficient in myself, but God's grace makes me sufficient. False humility says, I am not sufficient, period. One opens the door to divine empowerment, the other locks you in spiritual poverty. Fear functions through the illusion of control, promising that if you can anticipate every variable, manage every outcome, and protect against every threat, then you'll be safe. But control is the cruelest illusion, because the harder you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. The person who tries to control every aspect of their relationships kills the spontaneity that makes relationships alive. The person who tries to control every aspect of their future kills the possibility that their future could be better than anything they could have planned. Fear creates elaborate systems of self-protection that become systems of self-imprisonment. It builds walls that are supposed to keep danger out, but end up keeping blessing from getting in. It constructs barriers around your heart that are meant to prevent pain, but actually prevent love. It develops strategies for avoiding loss that simultaneously prevent gain. The fear voice speaks constantly in your inner dialogue, offering commentary on every situation, every relationship, every opportunity. It says things like, "This is too good to be true. People always disappoint you eventually. If you get your hopes up, you'll just be hurt again. God helps those who help themselves, so you better not depend on anyone else. Trust, but verify everything. Hope for the best, but expect the worst." These statements sound reasonable, even wise, but they are actually fear's attempts to keep you in emotional exile from the very connections and opportunities that could transform your life. Fear's voice is not the voice of wisdom. It's the voice of trauma that hasn't been healed, wounds that haven't been tended, disappointments that haven't been processed into wisdom. If this exploration of fear's tactics is hitting close to home, if you're recognizing patterns in your own thinking and feeling, then I need you to pause right here and make a decision that will determine whether this message transforms your life or just temporarily disturbs your comfort. Subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already, because we're about to transition into the most powerful part of this message, where I'll show you exactly how trust operates and how to cultivate it even when fear feels overwhelming. Hit that like button, because your engagement tells me that this content is changing lives, and activate those notifications, because the next video will build on everything we're uncovering today. Do it now. And let's continue this transformational journey together. But trust operates on entirely different principles than fear, and understanding these principles is crucial for winning the battle in your heart. Trust does not ignore reality. It chooses to focus on possibilities within reality that fear cannot see. Trust acknowledges that bad things can happen, while simultaneously believing that good things are more likely. Trust says, yes, there are risks, and yes, the potential rewards are worth taking those risks. Trust begins with the radical recognition that uncertainty is not your enemy. Uncertainty is the space where miracles happen. Every breakthrough you've ever experienced came through a doorway of uncertainty. Every promotion, every healed relationship, every answered prayer, every moment of unexpected joy entered your life through circumstances you couldn't predict or control. Certainty is where you maintain what you already have. Uncertainty is where you discover what you didn't even know was possible. Trust operates through what we might call intelligent hope. This is not wishful thinking or naive optimism. Intelligent hope looks at patterns of goodness in your life and expects those patterns to continue. It remembers the ways God has provided in the past and trusts Him to provide in the future. It acknowledges that methods may change, but faithfulness remains constant. When you choose trust over fear, you shift from defensive living to creative living. Instead of spending your energy protecting what you have, you invest your energy in cultivating what could be. Instead of calculating how things might go wrong, you strategize how things might go beautifully right. Instead of preparing for failure, you prepare for success while maintaining the flexibility to handle whatever actually comes. Trust recognizes that your track record of surviving difficult times is 100%. You have made it through every hard day, every broken heart, every financial crisis, every health scare, every family drama that you've ever faced. You are tougher than you think, more resilient than you believe, and more capable than fear would have you imagine. This doesn't mean future challenges won't be real. It means you have evidence that you can handle whatever comes. Trust understands that relationships require vulnerability, and vulnerability always involves risk. But trust also understands that the alternative to vulnerable relationships is not safety. The alternative is isolation. The person who will not risk being hurt will never experience being deeply loved. The person who will not risk disappointment will never experience surprise joy. The person who will not risk loss will never experience gain. In practical terms, trust shows up as the willingness to have difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. Trust appears as the choice to believe the best about someone's intentions while still maintaining healthy boundaries. Trust manifests as the decision to pursue opportunities even when the outcome is not guaranteed. Trust operates through surrender. But surrender is not passive resignation. Surrender is the active choice to align your will with God's will, to cooperate with grace instead of fighting against it. Surrender says, I will do everything I can do, and I will trust God with everything I cannot do. This is not laziness. This is the wisdom that recognizes the difference between your responsibilities and God's responsibilities. The flesh demands guarantees before commitment. The Spirit offers commitment as the pathway to guarantees. The flesh wants to see the entire staircase before taking the first step. The Spirit is willing to climb one step at a time, trusting that each step will reveal the next. The flesh insists on understanding before believing. The Spirit is willing to believe as the foundation for understanding. Trust also operates through what might be called holy stubbornness. This is the decision to keep believing in goodness, even when current circumstances suggest otherwise. It's the choice to keep investing in relationships even after you've been disappointed. It's the commitment to keep pursuing dreams even after you've experienced setbacks. This is not denial of reality. This is the refusal to let temporary circumstances define permanent possibilities. When trust becomes your operating system instead of fear, you discover that life becomes an adventure rather than a threat. Challenges become opportunities for growth rather than evidence of danger. Setbacks become setups for comebacks rather than proof that you should never have tried in the first place. But trust is not just a feeling. Trust is a discipline. And like any discipline, it must be cultivated through specific intentional practices that gradually retrain your heart to choose faith over fear. These are not complicated spiritual exercises that require years of preparation. These are simple, daily choices that create profound transformation over time. The first discipline of trust is the practice of gratitude for what is, rather than anxiety about what might be. Every morning, before your feet hit the floor, before you check your phone, before you allow your mind to run through its catalogue of concerns, spend 5 minutes remembering specific moments when God came through for you. Not general acknowledgements like, God is good, but specific memories. The time the money showed up exactly when you needed it. The relationship that healed when you thought it was permanently broken. The opportunity that appeared just when you had given up hope. This is not positive thinking. This is evidence collection. You are training your heart to remember patterns of faithfulness rather than rehearsing possibilities of failure. Fear wants you to forget every time trust was rewarded and remember every time it was disappointed. Gratitude reverses this process, building a foundation of confidence in God's character based on His track record in your life. The second discipline is the practice of speaking trust instead of fear. Your words create the emotional climate you live in. When you constantly verbalize worst-case scenarios, you train your heart to expect worst-case outcomes. When you consistently speak possibilities and hopes, you create internal space for those possibilities to manifest. This doesn't mean denying problems or refusing to acknowledge challenges. It means choosing to frame those challenges in language that opens doors rather than closes them. Instead of, this will never work, try, I'm curious to see how this will work out. Instead of, people always let you down, try, I'm looking forward to being surprised by someone's kindness. Instead of, I can't trust anyone, try, I'm learning to trust wisely. The third discipline is the practice of taking small, concrete steps toward what you hope for instead of large. Dramatic leaps away from what you fear. Fear motivates through avoidance. Trust motivates through approach. Fear says, run from danger. Trust says, walk toward goodness. The person controlled by fear organizes their life around what they don't want. The person guided by trust organizes their life around what they do want. If you want to trust God more deeply, take one small action each day that requires faith. If you want to trust people more wisely, have one authentic conversation each week with someone you're learning to know. If you want to trust yourself more fully, make one decision each day based on your values rather than your fears. The fourth discipline is the practice of reframing obstacles as invitations rather than barriers. Fear sees every challenge as evidence that you're on the wrong path. Trust sees every challenge as an invitation to grow stronger, more creative, more dependent on God. Fear asks, "Why is this happening to me?" Trust asks, "How is this growing me?" This is not about pretending that painful things are actually pleasant. This is about recognizing that painful things can serve purposes you cannot immediately see. The relationship that ended taught you what you actually need in love. The job you lost opened space for the opportunity you couldn't have imagined. The health crisis that scared you also motivated changes that ultimately made you stronger. The fifth discipline is the practice of investing in relationships despite their risks, rather than avoiding relationships because of their costs. Fear calculates the price of trust and decides it's too expensive. Trust calculates the cost of isolation and decides it's too high. Fear says relationships will hurt you. Trust says relationships will heal you. Fear says people will disappoint you. Trust says people will also surprise you. This means choosing vulnerability in small doses rather than emotional walls in large doses. It means having the hard conversation instead of letting resentment build. It means extending forgiveness even when it hasn't been earned, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve the freedom that forgiveness brings. The sixth discipline is the practice of planning for success rather than preparing for failure. Fear-based planning spends most of its energy creating contingencies for what could go wrong. Trust-based planning spends most of its energy creating strategies for what could go right. Both acknowledge that multiple outcomes are possible, but they invest their primary focus in different possibilities. When you're starting a business, fear asks, "What happens if this fails?" Trust asks, "What happens when this succeeds?" When you're entering a relationship, fear asks, "How will I protect myself if this person hurts me?" Trust asks, "How will I love well if this person cherishes me?" When you're making any significant decision, fear focuses on minimizing loss, while trust focuses on maximizing gain. The seventh discipline is the practice of celebrating partial victories rather than dismissing them as incomplete successes. Fear has a perfectionist streak that invalidates any progress that falls short of total transformation. Trust recognizes that all meaningful change happens incrementally, that every step forward is worth celebrating, that progress is more important than perfection. If you prayed about something and you feel 5% more peaceful, celebrate that 5%. If you took a risk in a relationship and it went better than expected, acknowledge that victory. If you made a decision based on faith rather than fear and the outcome was imperfect but positive, honor that growth. Fear dismisses small wins as insignificant. Trust understands that small wins accumulate into large transformations. As we near the end of our time together, but before we reach the conclusion, I need you to make a decision that will determine whether this message becomes a moment of inspiration or a catalyst for genuine life change. If what you've heard today has stirred something in your spirit, if you feel equipped and challenged to choose trust over fear in new ways, then hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Activate those notifications because next week I'm releasing a video that builds directly on these principles, showing you exactly how to trust God when circumstances seem to contradict His promises. Your subscription tells me that transformation content like this is what you want to see more of. And honestly, your engagement determines whether I can keep creating these deep, life-changing messages. Do that now, and let's finish strong together. The eighth discipline is the practice of surrounding yourself with people who model trust rather than fear. The voices you listen to regularly shape the thoughts you think habitually. If you're constantly exposed to people who catastrophize, who assume the worst, who treat cynicism as sophistication, then you'll find yourself adopting those same patterns. But if you intentionally seek out relationships with people who choose faith over fear, hope over despair, trust over suspicion, then their courage becomes contagious. This might mean changing some relationships, limiting exposure to certain influences, or actively seeking new connections with people who inspire rather than drain you. It definitely means being selective about the content you consume, the conversations you engage in, and the communities you participate in. Fear is contagious, but so is faith. Trust is infectious, and you want to catch it from people who are further along in this journey than you are. The ninth discipline is the practice of praying for increased capacity to trust, rather than praying for circumstances that require less trust. Most of us pray, "God, make this situation easier so I don't have to trust you so much." But spiritual maturity prays, "God, increase my faith so I can trust you regardless of how this situation develops." This is a complete reversal of natural thinking, but it's the pathway to spiritual freedom. Instead of asking God to change your circumstances to accommodate your current level of trust, you ask God to expand your trust to handle whatever circumstances He allows. Instead of praying for problems to go away, you pray for faith to grow stronger. Instead of asking for life to become predictable, you ask for grace to thrive in uncertainty. The 10th discipline is the practice of acting as if trust is justified, even when feelings suggest otherwise. Trust is not primarily an emotion. Trust is a decision. You don't wait until you feel trusting to act in trusting ways. You act in trusting ways until your feelings align with your choices. You don't wait until fear disappears to take steps of faith. You take steps of faith until fear loses its power to paralyze you. This means making the phone call even when anxiety whispers that rejection is certain. It means having the difficult conversation even when fear suggests that conflict is inevitable. It means pursuing the opportunity even when doubt argues that failure is guaranteed. You act your way into trust rather than trying to feel your way into it. When these disciplines become regular practices rather than occasional experiments, something remarkable begins to happen in the landscape of your heart. The battle for trust doesn't disappear, but the balance of power shifts decisively toward faith. Fear still speaks, but trust speaks louder. Doubt still whispers, but hope shouts. Anxiety still appears, but peace prevails. You begin to see evidence of God's faithfulness that you couldn't recognize before because you weren't looking for it. You start experiencing provisions and protections that were always there, but invisible to eyes trained to spot danger rather than blessing. You discover that the risks you thought were reckless were actually reasonable, that the faith you thought was foolish was actually wise. The person you become through choosing trust over fear is not someone who never experiences uncertainty. It's someone who has learned to dance with uncertainty instead of being paralyzed by it. You don't become someone who never gets hurt. You become someone who recovers more quickly from hurt and learns more deeply from pain. You don't become someone who never faces challenges. You become someone who approaches challenges with creativity rather than dread. Trust transforms how you enter each day. Instead of waking up wondering what could go wrong, you wake up curious about what could go right. Instead of approaching people with suspicion, you approach them with openness. Instead of entering situations with defensive strategies, you enter them with generous spirits. This transformation affects every area of your life. In your relationships, you become someone who brings out the best in others because you expect the best from them. In your work, you become someone who takes creative risks that lead to innovative solutions. In your finances, you become someone who gives generously and invests wisely because you trust in God's provision. In your health, you become someone who takes care of yourself while trusting God with outcomes beyond your control. The victory of trust over fear is not a one-time battle, but a daily choice, a moment-by-moment decision to side with faith rather than surrender to doubt. Some days the choice is easy because circumstances align with hope. Other days, the choice is difficult because circumstances seem to contradict everything you believe about God's goodness. But on both easy days and difficult days, the choice remains the same. Will you trust or will you fear? The beautiful thing about this battle is that every time you choose trust, you make the next choice easier. Every time you take a step of faith and discover that the ground holds, you gain confidence for the next step. Every time you extend yourself in love and find that you're received rather than rejected, you expand your capacity for future vulnerability. Every time you surrender control and discover that God's plans are better than your plans, you develop deeper willingness to surrender again. Trust begets trust. Faith generates faith. Love creates love. The more you practice these disciplines, the more natural they become. What once required tremendous effort gradually becomes effortless response. What once felt risky begins to feel reasonable. What once seemed impossible starts to feel inevitable. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of trust's victory is not just what it does for you, but what it does through you. When you become a person who trusts deeply, you become a person others can trust safely. When you become someone who chooses faith over fear, you inspire others to make the same choice. When you become someone who lives with open hands rather than clenched fists, you create space for others to experience the same freedom. Your trust becomes a gift you give to everyone around you. Your spouse feels safer being vulnerable because you've chosen trust over suspicion. Your children learn courage because they see you facing uncertainty with faith. Your friends experience freedom because you offer grace instead of judgment. Your co-workers discover creativity because you create environments where risks are rewarded rather than punished. The ripple effects of your choice to trust rather than fear extend far beyond your personal life into spheres of influence you may never fully recognize. The decision you make in your heart today about whether to trust or fear will impact conversations you haven't had yet, relationships you haven't formed yet, and opportunities you haven't imagined yet. This is why this battle matters so much. This is why fear fights so hard to maintain control. This is why trust requires such intentional cultivation. The stakes are not just your personal happiness or peace of mind. The stakes are the kind of person you become and the kind of impact you have on the world around you. As we conclude this exploration of the battle for trust, return with me to where we began. There is indeed a war happening in your heart, but now you understand its true nature. This is not just a conflict between two emotions or two mindsets. This is a battle between two ways of being in the world. Two approaches to life, two responses to the fundamental uncertainty that defines human existence. Fear offers the illusion of safety through control, the promise of security through self-protection, the hope of avoiding pain through avoiding risk. But fear's promises are ultimately empty because the safety it offers is actually stagnation. The security it provides is actually isolation, and the pain it helps you avoid is often the very pain that would lead to growth. Trust offers something entirely different. Trust offers real safety through surrender, genuine security through openness, and meaningful growth through the willingness to experience pain as the price of transformation. Trust's promises are not empty because they're not based on your ability to control outcomes, but on God's commitment to work all things together for good. The choice between trust and fear is ultimately the choice between fear-based living and love-based living, between defensive positioning and creative engagement, between survival mode and abundant life. It's the choice between asking, "How can I protect myself?" and asking, "How can I grow?" It's the choice between, "How can I avoid loss?" and "How can I experience gain?" Every morning when you wake up, this choice presents itself again. Every relationship offers you the opportunity to choose trust over suspicion. Every challenge invites you to choose faith over fear. Every uncertainty creates space for you to choose hope over despair. The beautiful truth is that you don't have to win this battle perfectly or permanently. You just have to win it consistently. You don't have to eliminate fear completely. You just have to refuse to let fear make your decisions. You don't have to become someone who never doubts. You just have to become someone who doesn't let doubt determine your direction. The journey toward trust is itself an act of trust. Trusting that growth is possible, that change is achievable, that healing can happen, that freedom is available. Starting this journey requires trusting that the path exists even when you can't see the destination. But here's what I can promise you, based on the testimony of countless people who have walked this path before you. Every step you take toward trust will be rewarded with evidence that trust was the right choice. Every act of faith will be met with grace. Every movement toward God will be matched by God's movement toward you. The battle for trust is winnable, not because you're strong enough to defeat fear through willpower, but because you're loved enough for God to defeat fear through His power working in you. The victory is available not because you can manufacture perfect faith, but because perfect love can transform imperfect faith into perfect freedom. If this message has awakened something in your spirit that was sleeping, if you feel equipped to fight this battle with new weapons and new strategies, if you sense that trust is not just a nice idea, but a necessary discipline for the life you want to live, then I need you to do 3 things before this video ends. First, give this video a like because that tells me that content like this is changing lives and encourages me to keep creating messages that go this deep. Second, subscribe to this channel and activate those notifications because I'm committed to bringing you the spiritual tools and biblical insights that equip you for the battles that matter most. And third, share this video with someone who's struggling between trust and fear, because sometimes God uses us to deliver exactly the message someone needs to hear, exactly when they need to hear it. Your engagement doesn't just help my channel, it helps this message reach people whose lives could be transformed by choosing trust over fear. Do those 3 things now, and then go live like someone who believes that trust is not just safer than fear, but the only path to the life you were created to live.